We're human. Sometimes, subhanAllah, you'll find individuals say, well, you can't be a psychiatrist or a psychologist as a Muslim. You only trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is mistaken. Sadly, the exemplification of our faith is used by the sciences that Allah has brought on this earth. And He has blessed people to go into these professions to further help society. And this is ibadah, this is worship. This is worship. As long as we use that in a manner that is conducive, and that is the way forward. Using those resources that are present to make sure that we can empower ourselves as human beings with our strength and our belief in our Creator, but making sure that those faculties that He has given us that may affect our progress is appropriately handled by going to those that are professional in those fields. So without further ado, I want to introduce two illustrious individuals. The first one sitting on my left is Sister Saba. She is a licensed professional counselor for the past 3 years. She has a clinic in Euless, Texas. And mashallah, she has been doing this for the past 3 years, and she's probably been studying this before that and been interested in helping and counseling individuals, Muslim and non-Muslim. So this is important for us to understand because, as I mentioned to the board, I mentioned to individuals, is that the goal is, when we leave out of here, have we met someone new? When we leave out of here, if we're facing problems, is there a number to call? Is there a person to speak to? When we face injustice at our jobs, from our friends, at a 7-Eleven, at a Starbucks, and we know 90% it was because of our faith, what do? The brother on my left, the sheikh on my left that is sitting next to Sister Saba, his brother is Dr. Ikram. He is an individual that works with CARE. How many of you are familiar with CARE? Okay. What does CARE stand for? Council of American and Islamic Relations. So this organization serves to preserve the rights, the civil rights that you have been given in this country, to make sure that they are maintained if it is something that has been violated because of your faith, which is unconstitutional. But inshallah, he will expound upon that, and this is how we are planning to move forward. Again, I want to reiterate that please see these individuals if you have any questions after the lecture, to make sure that after this lecture you have some people to reach out to, or maybe to get to some other converts that you know to reach out to. So what we'll do now is, inshallah, we'll start with Sister Saba and her presentation. Okay. I have a question for you all. Now, all of you have some paper and some pens on your table, correct? We have a question for you, and we would like for you to answer it in the quickest way possible. Inshallah. Our presentation is 30 minutes, and Dr. Akram's presentation is 30 minutes also. There it wasn't. Just kidding. I can ask. Sure. That's fine, brother. Not. It was not. Okay, the question. How was your identity of self challenged when you became a Muslim? How was your identity of self challenged when you became a Muslim? What do you mean by self?
Assalamualaikum everyone. So what I mean by self is, how was your identity? Self is, how was your identity challenged? When you became a Muslim, did you have different thoughts about yourself? How was your values challenged? How was your interactions with your family? How did that challenge your sense of self? So when you were hanging out with your family, did they treat you differently? When you were in your community, how were you treated? Were you treated differently when you were Muslim versus when you were non-Muslim? Do you have more healthy, positive thoughts before you were Muslim, and then when you when you were non-Muslim, and when you became a Muslim, how did the quality of your thoughts change? So that's what I mean about your identity.
So you can write on there, inshallah, for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then I will call on some fortunate individuals. Depends on how they look at it. It's all about perception. It's all, you know. Okay. Ladies first. Let's see. Who's not paying attention? Who's on their phone? Who's texting? Okay. Yes, in the yes. Sister, no. Yes, yes. She's chosen. Yes. Sister, what's your name?
Brandy.
Brandy?
Yeah.
You converted to Islam?
Yes, I did.
How long ago?
When I was 18.
18?
Yeah.
MashaAllah, congratulations.
Since 903.
It's 93.
I can't do the math.
Sorry?
I can't do the math. I was 18 when I converted, so I guess like most 18-year-olds, I don't know if you really have that much of an identity. I don't know, maybe you do. But my family wasn't happy when I converted.
Okay.
So it was really hard with my family. And then when I took Shahada, actually I started wearing hijab the next day. So
You started wearing hijab when?
the next day.
The next day. Okay.
I'm kind of an overachiever.
Okay.
But it was hard because I guess it's hard with your friends of explaining why you converted, or most of the friends I didn't maintain. My family eventually came around.
Okay, so sister.
But I felt better about myself actually, because I just felt like I was living my life the way that I wanted to live my life. And when I read the Quran, I knew that it was true. So once you know the truth, how can you deny it?
Okay. And you felt that the hijab was a strong example of that feeling that you had in your heart.
Yeah, I'm proud that I'm Muslim. I want people to know.
You wanted people to know.
Yeah, because if people will approach you and ask questions, for me, that's how I felt. I mean, each person's decision is like their own. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so let me ask you. You said your mom didn't like it, but she saw you with the veil.
Well, it was, my mom has passed away, but my dad didn't like it, my sister didn't like it.
He didn't like it. What was their response when they saw you wearing it?
When you come to my house, don't wear it.
When you come to my house, don't wear it.
Yeah, so I didn't see them for a while.
Wow. Okay. Did that was that?
It was hard, but I thought, I know that I'm not doing anything wrong. So, I mean,
Okay.
I was just patient and eventually they came around.
MashaAllah. Okay. Jazakallah khair, sister. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. And again, we have to really, mashallah, thank her, because this is personal information. This is personal information, so it's kind of like she's sharing this with the family. And that's really how we have to look at it. Because you have to understand, and the fact that you're called on, you don't feel comfortable, please let me know. I don't want to put you on the spot, because I don't want to bring back any traumatic, events. Okay? If you feel comfortable, that's fine. If not, just please ask to, you can just, one of those questions. Okay. From the brothers. Yes, sir. What's your name, Jim? Nuri. Where are you from? Mo City. I'm from A-Leaf.
Yeah.
You from Houston?
Yes, I've met you before. I appreciate the work that you did with New You.
Oh, okay. Mashallah. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that.
How long have you been Muslim?
Going on 3 years.
3 years. Congratulations. Congratulations. Mashallah. Congratulations.
So, my identity of self, I would say that I hold myself to a higher standard. I guess if that makes sense. I've always been somewhat of a stranger in this world, and honestly, I became more comfortable with being a stranger as I became Muslim. So,
Okay. So, what kind of stranger were you to your relatives?
I was always different. I mean,
Even before you converted?
yeah, I challenged them on certain things that was not right, like backbiting and many other things that I didn't feel was the right thing to do. So I was always kind of the one that like, oh, don't do that around him, or even my sisters when they come around me, I challenge them on their dress and their attire even before I was Muslim. So they'd be like, okay, Jonathan's gonna be here. I'm not gonna be wearing this, or they would know that they're gonna have to hear about that.
So okay, so it was respectful. So you were kind of like the pastor at the church. When you go around, okay, he said, okay, just be on your best man. When he leaves, one of those. Okay, no, that's how you'll be looked at sometimes with the relatives. Sometimes the Muslim, non-Muslim doesn't matter. This is the holy man or the holy woman, right? That's fine. That's fine. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, brother.
Nuri.
Brother Nuri. Jazakallah khair. Everybody give him a round of applause, brother Nuri. Okay, so, yes ma'am.
All right, so Erickson, he proposes the six, or I don't even know how many stages, but he proposes stages of psychosocial development. And I believe that when people convert or they go through a very traumatic experience or very emotional experience, it doesn't have to be a negative experience, but something that's a huge experience, they might go through that identity versus role confusion again. So a closer look at this stage is questions that you might ask yourself now that you just converted. Who am I? What are my values and my self-concepts? How do I want to associate with others? Who do I want to associate? How can I maintain who I am and be around people who are different than me? I feel like that's a really big question that I hear a lot from clients is to ask, they oftentimes ask, how do I maintain who I am around people who are different? Right now that you're going and being around your family that's maybe not Muslim, you're going to have to change, you kind of have to change who you were before and show them a newer you, and that can be kind of difficult for others. So if you don't pass the stage successfully, Erickson says that you might not be, it will hinder your development in the next stage, which is intimacy versus isolation. Because if you don't have a strong sense of self or a strong identity, how are you going to be able to be intimate with somebody else and give yourself to somebody else?
So you're talking about like marriage?
Yeah, in marriage. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if someone's identity when they become Muslim is not solid or strong integrity of who they are, being comfortable in their own skin, right? It will roll over onto their relationship with their husband or wife.
Correct. And what also can be very confusing, I think, is that when you first become Muslim, you might be hearing a lot of do's and don'ts, like you should do this, you shouldn't do this, and that can become very confusing because you're like, okay, what are my boundaries? What do I feel comfortable with doing? This is what Islam tells me, but maybe I'm not ready to follow all of these rules, and it can be really hard. And then that in and of itself can make you lose who you are. And then on top of that, if you do get into a relationship, then you have maybe a spouse telling you, this is how you should practice Islam, this is how you should be, and that can also create a confusion of identity.
Okay, let me stop there real quick. You just hit on something. And I'm almost sure sisters face this more than brothers. When the convert sister gets married to a brother that's from a Muslim country, did y'all hear me? Yes? Okay. Why is this more common with the sisters? Can a sister answer that? Because there's a who?
The male is predominantly the leader of the household.
Predominantly the leader. And sometimes there may be a culture clash because the sister's born and raised here and converts to Islam and he may not be. And he has some certain values from his country. Sister, why are you working? I come home, the house should be immaculate. The food should be exactly. So, as you were talking about, as you mentioned, subhanAllah, if the husband does not show that form of, I think you alluded to, some form of affection, the wife may question herself. Is that what you kind of alluded to?
What I'm saying is that if you're not sure about yourself in Islam, and if you're not sure of your identity in an Islamic context, or you don't know all the rules, let's say, or all of the things that you need to follow, right? And then you get married to somebody, and you don't have a strong sense of identity. Then at that point, they may be able to overcome, and this happens even if you're not in a relationship in general, if you don't have a strong sense of identity, but then they can overpower you, and especially because in Islam, the man, like you said, is the leader, it becomes even more confusing. Like, how do I maintain who I am and then still be in this relationship?
Kids, thank you. Yes, please.
Great Muslim like you just read about.
You read about, right?
And then you find out all these things
You're welcome.
after marriage, after it's too late.
Too late.
They're not the Muslim, they thought they were. That can be very confusing too.
And it's interesting how you mentioned overpowered. Along with those expectations, he may be from a Muslim country, or a country that has Muslims in it. Sometimes we say Islamic household or household of Muslims. There's a difference, right? So just the expectation, it's from this Muslim country. Alas, I have the works. Everything's there. It's going to be Islam in my household. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. And then you find out Fajr has morning prayers come for the whole weekend. He's still sleeping. And he's asking, he's like, not really. These types of expectations. So you're exactly right. I mean, subhanAllah, coming in naive. And that's why what you were talking about is it's so important for especially sisters to have to learn their rights, of marriage. The fact that she deserves a dowry, that's her right. It's obligatory upon the man to provide for her a dowry. It's obligatory upon the man to provide for her, place of living, sustenance, etc. And a lot of times they don't know this, and the man can take advantage. Therefore, her identity can be compromised during the marriage or after, unfortunately, divorce.
And this also can happen with friendships. So when you first become Muslim, I heard a lot of you guys saying that you felt like you didn't really care maybe what your parents might have thought because you felt like you were doing the right thing. So it's like, okay, even though they're rejecting me in this aspect of who I am, I still believe firmly that I'm doing the right thing, so I don't need to feel guilt about it. But when you're around other Muslims who might be giving you advice on how they practice Islam, and then you become confused because you're like, okay, how do I want to practice Islam? And what is right and what is wrong? And if you are around people that maybe don't practice Islam the way that you want to practice it, then that can become very confusing. You can also have a lot of guilt associated with that, whether it's in marriage or in a friendship. The other thing that can play a role in identity formation happens, of course, in childhood. And I would call that the negative self or the anti-self concept. And so identity is not fixed, right? It's fluid, it's something that changes. And our childhood experiences influence our current identity. So I believe, and what I found when I work with clients is that everybody has aspects of the anti-self and the positive self. So everybody has aspects of the negative self, a negative self concept, and a positive self concept. Now, depending upon the amount of trauma and negative experiences that you may have faced in your life, you may have more aspects of the negative self concept, and vice versa with the positive self concept. So trauma, negative events, critical words can all cause us to have an anti-self concept, and love, positive events, and nurturance can cause us to have a positive self concept.
Can you, what are some examples?
Sure, I was going to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So the anti-self, let me give you guys examples of the anti-self personality. And that is basically what I would call our inner critic. So that voice in our head that tells us that we're not doing a good job, or that we're not enough. And that voice can be judgmental, self-critical. It can encourage us to engage in behavior that limits us. It can sabotage our goals, and it's self-destructive. And it's basically that voice that's constantly judging you in your mind. Does anyone have examples that they might want to share of that negative voice that they have in their head? Sure.
Sister, what's your name? Susan.
Okay.
And so the whole climate change, in Texas especially.
She said her kids were born after 9/11, so the whole climate changed.
Yeah, and actually they were born before 9/11,
Before, I'm
but the
sorry.
way they were treated after 9/11, my son would be called a terrorist on the school bus, and think my kids did everything to downplay the Muslim thing because of the attacks they were getting at school. And like, how does that factor into self-identity? I mean, how would you help your children at home if they're facing this sort of prejudice at school? I mean, it is really vicious.
Yeah, our environment definitely affects our view of ourselves. And I guess that's the next part of the presentation of how we can create a positive sense of self. But yes, it's really difficult. And oftentimes when we even bully kids that are being bullied, they end up developing this negative self-concept.
And my kids are biracial. So that added another factor to their identity crisis. You know, they didn't know what camp was that. Were they Asian or American?
Like a values conflict.
They didn't want to be Muslim at school because of calling them terrorists and stuff. Did you bring a bomb in your backpack?
Right.
After a while, that really bullying affects the kids' their view of Islam.
Right.
If they're not real strong in that self-identity, it can affect them.
Definitely. So I think she's gonna probably in the slides you're gonna talk
Yes,
about.
I'll hit on how we cultivate a more positive sense of self. So before I even go into the slide, what I do want to say is that when you feel like you're doing when you feel like you are doing the right thing, I think that helps in creating a positive sense of self. So if you know that you are practicing Islam the right way, and that you are doing things that you want to do based on your thoughts and feelings, I think that can help. But also to be able to challenge when other people are giving us those critical words. So sometimes we internalize those critical words, and that's what we're speaking about. So the first step would be to become aware of your thoughts and your feelings. The second thing that I think is important is to live by your values. And the third thing is to cultivate self-compassion. And then, of course, if none of that works, I would definitely say seek therapy or professional guidance in trying to understand how your patterns affect you currently.
Okay, so you mentioned becoming aware of your thoughts and feelings. Is that where the whole emotional intelligence comes in?
Yes.
So how does that, so for some people, for instance, she probably found out from her child that they came and asked her, mentioned to them, you're going to carry a bomb in your backpack, you're going to carry. But some of us, we don't have that dialogue with our children. Some of them may be introverts. I'm not saying introvert is a bad quality, but they don't feel that they can talk to us about this. So if they're not, I don't want to say if they're not emotionally intelligent, if they don't know how to express their emotions.
Or be assertive in their thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, and tell someone about it.
Right. So in therapy, for example, the children are often bullied. One of the things that we work with them is assertiveness training. So how are you able to stand up for yourself instead of internalizing everything that the bully is telling you? How can you stand up and say, okay, what you're saying is wrong, and this is my perspective. And using I statements. There's certain skills that we would teach a client how to use to be able to become assertive. But I think the first step is also just becoming aware of your thoughts and feelings. I think oftentimes parents can help enhance a child's emotional intelligence by just asking them, okay, what do you feel in this moment? What are your thoughts about this? Having those healthy conversations. And then whenever that event does happen, let's say they were bullied, then to talk about it and say, okay, tell me what happened in this event. How did you feel? What did you say? How did you respond? How do you wish you could have responded? So having a conversation after that can really help I think alleviate some of the negative consequences of internalizing those thoughts.
Yes, sir. Your name? Kareem. Alaikum salam.
Something that's very important as well that only occurs inside of communities a lot as well. You have people mashallah, in Baltimore, unfortunately, year before last, we had a young sister that committed suicide. That went to a Muslim school. And it wasn't the school just itself, it was multiple things that was going on. She felt bullied within that school. She wasn't Muslim, she wasn't other. And as a person growing up in Islam and in communities, I've experienced those things as well. And so it makes your deen, sometimes your iman will go up and down. So those of us that have been Muslims either it's 2 or 3 years, or 30 years, or 40 years, we experience those things as well. And I appreciate our sisters for expressing ourselves, but I would speak to our brothers and say, please, men, seek help. Seek therapy. For a long time, my wife asked me to go to therapy, but I didn't want to go.
Why not?
Try. I can go to Allah, I can pray it all away.
Thank
I
you.
don't need that. I'm a leader. I'm the one that's supposed to be giving mentors, but we have to be humble. You know, so inshallah, man, please humble yourself. You know, we've experienced trauma ourselves through different things, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, sexual. These things are happening in our communities. So it's important for us to admit to these things. It's okay that you feel this way, but it's not okay to continue, you know, to feel it. And I really appreciate you all sharing it. So I would just say, please, like, even that bullying that's coming, that's going to go inside, talk to your children, because they may be thinking things that you don't know. Inshallah, you know, take it from that. So I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you. Say yourself up there. Appreciate it. And that's kind of, you know, sometimes, I'm going to need you to expound upon this. Is it, sometimes we don't even know that we have those feelings until it's brought out.
Right.
And I guess what you're mentioning, that self-conversation, you know, you with yourself,
Right.
is a means in bringing out things that you never knew existed.
Right. So oftentimes kids might not even realize how their bullying is affecting their self-confidence. So they don't even realize that it's affecting them. And so that's the first step, is to become aware of your thoughts and your feelings. And by going to therapy, becoming more emotionally intelligent. The first step I always tell clients when I work with them is to notice unhealthy guilt. When they start to notice guilt about feeling like I'm a bad person, to pull that apart and say, okay, like, let me challenge these thoughts, or let me see if there's validity to this thought. Like, if I say no, should I feel guilty, or should I not feel guilty? What am I saying no to? So things like that, like, the first step I would say is to notice unhealthy guilt. And then when you notice yourself thinking, what do other people think? And this is more in the context of, like, after you become Muslim. What do other people think? To then go back and think, what do I think? What do I think is valid? So oftentimes our thoughts might be shifting towards people's perception of us, people's reality of us. But then if we can bring it back to, okay, what do I think that can be really helpful in setting healthy boundaries for yourself. And so oftentimes I'll teach that to children as well and to adults. Yes.
They teach you about being passive, and some people in like domestic violence cases, they get so passive that they almost see it as a good thing, but actually it's not a good thing. And how do you recover somebody from that state where they don't even know what's right or wrong? They don't know even how to. They have no self-worth. They don't even what they've been through. They think that it's right. Even they're hurting inside, but they don't even know the difference. So how do you start from that?
Yeah, so that a lot of times when they are passive, right, that's the first thing is they have a lot of unhealthy guilt. So the first thing is to notice that, and then is to, even if they can't set the boundaries right away. So the thing is that when you're setting boundaries, it can be really difficult because you start to feel bad, you start to feel guilty, you start to feel like, oh, I shouldn't be setting this boundary. When I'm specifically talking about passive individuals. And so the first step is just to start recognizing what you wish you could have done. So I always tell clients to write down, okay, if let's say that your friend asked, and this is just a simplistic example, but let's say your friend asks you to go somewhere with her and you don't want to go, but you say yes anyway because it's difficult for you to say no. So in that instance, all those instances where you wish that you could have said no, to write that down. Okay, well, I wish I could have said no to this. When your mom asks you to do something that you maybe don't want to do, let's say this for like a teenager, then you write down, okay, I wish I could have done this differently. So I feel like that is really important before you actually set the boundary. That would be like the first step. Does that answer your question?
And I want to just touch on one point, really, with converts and you that have come to Islam. Just because you may have done something that is impermissible or haram in Islam doesn't mean you're a bad person. Okay? It doesn't mean that you're a bad person if you've done something that is haram in Islam. Okay? Say that you're a convert and you're trying to get married, so you go out on dates with somebody. You know in Islam we particularly don't date. Okay? Does that mean that you're a bad person destined for, Jahannam in the hellfire? No, it doesn't necessitate that. It means that you're human, and what's most important is that you're trying to work on yourself, and this is an example of that process. So what she's saying right now, from her expertise and what she's learned, tying that into Islam is very, very important. And if we stop and think about it, the whole concept of dhikr is that, what they call, I think it's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, like you can speak gratitude, right? So you're speaking to yourself, you're asking yourself these questions, right? And we know in Islam, when shaitan comes to you, you say, like, I seek refuge from shaitan the accursed. You say, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, praise This is to allow you to think about the actions of Allah upon you and upon others, which can change your perception, further rehabilitating yourself. Right? So it's very important when she mentioned that, when people think, some people think you're doing something wrong, and you say, am I a bad person? I don't want to go around them because they're going to think I'm a bad person. And what she's saying is phenomenal, because you have to stop and ask yourself this question. Just remember. Michael, why don't you just stand in the middle?
If I might say, one of the biggest problems that I see that a lot of converts do is they want to know everything right away. And what I tell a lot of converts is baby steps. You have to you have to crawl before you can walk and before you can run. Don't try to get all the information, because then it feels as if we can't do anything. You know what I mean? So if you go baby steps, then every time, I always tell people, look, when you go to seek the knowledge, it's not, for me, it's not a sin until I get that knowledge. So once you know, now you're accountable for the knowledge you know. So just take baby steps, because a lot of the converts that I've come across will feel so isolated or so restricted that they're like, oh, I can't do this. This is too much of no's. You understand? So once you take a sip versus swallowing the whole bottle, then you're able to embrace everything new that you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that comes with that. It sounds like you're kind of speaking to the same thing I was thinking about boundaries. Is that start small? Yes. Next question.
In my experience as well, I come from a background where my dad was a Baptist minister for over 50 years, and everything was really, really hard on us, and then coming into Islam, you're around, naturally you're going to be hard on yourself, when you're kind of in that background. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on when you're embracing Islam and you're, learning all this knowledge. From my experience, it's better not to take things on full force, even if you have that knowledge, because that might be a head knowledge, but not yet a heart knowledge. And so even I think what you said previously by saying, hey, I would like to do this, or I wish I could do this one day, even embracing a religion like that should be done that from that perspective as well, because sometimes our eyes for the deen are bigger than what we can handle. And I know there's some hadith that even talk about how they say that, forgive me, may Allah forgive me if I'm wrong, but it says that, we shouldn't go too far to the right or too far to the left, but be balanced. And because if you push yourself even too far in the deen, you can retract, you go backwards. And I've seen that,
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. And Shaka, do you want me to respond to it, or would you rather respond to it? Okay. So, yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, because it's really, I think to ask yourself, that self-compassion, you're talking about self-compassion. Instead of being like, oh, I should do this, why aren't I doing this? Why aren't I fulfilling all the obligations that are placed on me? To say, okay, at one point, this is the goal. At one point, I want to get here, but it's okay that I'm not here yet. And I still love myself, and I still care for myself, even though I can't be a perfect Muslim. Because you'll never get to that place where you can be absolutely sinless. You're not able. So I really do think self-compassion is really important, and that brings me. That was my third concept that I was talking about, was cultivating self-compassion. So, for example, oftentimes people do this to others, and we do this to ourselves. So invalidating statements would look like, when we're feeling something negative, or we're feeling like we can't do something, we might think, oh, snap out of it, just try to be happy for once, why are you not better already, why aren't you becoming, to go back to that example of being the best Muslim, why can't I do everything Islam tells me to do? To tell yourself, I understand what you're feeling, it's real, it's okay, tell yourself that, to ask yourself questions, to be interested in why you're feeling those things. There's a book, it's called Self-Compassion. I think it's literally called Self-Compassion, yeah. And it talks a lot about how you can heal just by being kinder to yourself. And that goes again back to the internal critic that might have been developed either through bullies or through parents, not on purpose, of course, but through bullies or through negative parental experiences. You develop this inner critic or this inner bully. And in order to overcome that, developing self-compassion is a really important tool to get to your goals. And then the second thing is to identify your values. So when you first become Muslim, to ask yourself, to identify great moments of emotion, pain, or joy, where we feel we care, who are our heroes. So looking at the life of the Prophet maybe and asking ourselves what we admire about him, what do we want in ourselves. To ask yourself, if no one was watching, what would we do? So then again, getting away from what other people think about us. And the last thing is to ask what makes you feel like getting up in the morning. Like what makes you feel happy, what makes you feel like you're living a meaningful life. And that's all I have.
Any questions? Any questions? Brothers didn't speak at all. See, what the brother was saying is that's the hop. That's the truth. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My name's Jeff. My question is this: is your presentation really deals with young people who accept Islam? Well, and as you were talking, I was sitting there thinking, I said, well, I've looked in the mirror a couple of times already. Okay? So, as a person who accepted Islam a little bit later on, just a little bit, how do I deal with that? Because some of the things that most young people go through or think is important, it's important to me. I've already been there, got that t-shirt. So, how do I deal with it? Because a lot of things you were saying about family, well, I accepted Islam. My family, and me being the oldest, I said, I'm a Muslim, you're going to deal with it. Guess what? They dealt with it. Except for my two aunts, one's 85, one's 95, so I had to that was kind of tough. But I wish you would address more of how we're going to deal with Islam and accepting Islam at not just a young age, but middle age or a little bit more middle age. Because we've got issues.
No, it's not mine.
I haven't felt that you addressed.
Mine's right there.
We have issues also that I wish next time you would address for Muslims, for people who are reversed to accept Islam. I don't have, well, I'm kind of shy, so.
Okay.
So I'm going to say that just because it was hard for me to relate in your conversation with some of the I feel bad or my family's not going to like it, my friends are going to walk away from me. I'm just not having those issues because I wear it right here. And even when I'm in my workplace, I just walk down the aisles in my rows, around the office and say, you're praying with me this week. And that's what's going to happen with me. I'm going to have those people who are going to fast with me, they're going to pray with me during Ramadan, except for the two aunts. I'm not having those issues, so there's got to be other things for me to look at. And that's what I wish you would address in the next.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk after this and you can let me know a little bit about what you're talking about, because these are the things that I hear when I speak with Muslim converts. These are things that I've heard. And so I address it to that, but I would love to hear your thoughts, maybe after the class, on specifically what you're talking about, because I really like to know, like, what are the specific struggles. And yes, absolutely, they might be different. But thank you so much for sharing your input. I really appreciate it.
No, there's definitely one thing I want to address here is, okay, just one second, I want to address it. Okay. Is that, with converts, a lot of times, a number of experiences that converts weavers face are similar to those of the youth. Why? Because it's a whole issue of identity. Now, taking that into consideration, people are still different. We have different personalities, people with strong personalities, people with different personalities, introverts, extroverts, 45, 14. All of these can be converts. When we talk about youth, we talk about a certain age group. When you talk about young professionals in the master's, we're talking about a certain age group. When you talk about converts, we're talking about all of them. So it's a much bigger challenge. Now, what you're saying is, you totally understand, your shyness, and you probably wanted to address some of those things. Definitely, that's what I wanted to conclude at, inshallah, is, this is just to start something, a catalyst. For you to know the sister, to be able to speak to her, and those issues that you're talking about, you wish to disclose it to her in person and private, it's great, inshallah. But the goal is, again, is just to be introduced to her, to be able to speak to her after, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah bless you for addressing it. Yes, sister, yes, ma'am.
Assalamu alaikum. I just have
more questions, being a mother to young kids. How do we kind of work with them on this if we don't know there's an issue? I mean, obviously, if they're having trouble at school or something like that, then the teacher brings it up or something like that. But if my kids are homeschooled, so, I mean, they could be feeling something and I don't necessarily know it because maybe they feel too shy to say it. So what kind of questions or things can we talk to them about so we can help them with this identity?
Yeah, so asking them, you're right, it's hard sometimes to know if your child is experiencing difficult emotion. Most of the time kids don't even share their difficult experiences, and oftentimes when I see clients like that are younger in age, their parents will tell me this is the first time they've ever said that they wanted to hurt themselves. I never even knew that they were feeling this way. And I don't blame the parents because the child probably didn't tell the parent. So the thing that I think that the best thing to do, I think, is to have conversations around values, especially if they're in that age of identity versus crisis, to ask them about their values. And there's some really good questions that you can ask them. Some more questions that I would say that you could ask is right here, like who are you as a person? What are your values? Who do you want to associate with? How can you maintain who you are with around people who are different? So to ask them these questions to kind of get the ball rolling of like, okay, these are questions can kind of help you identify like what are their insecurities. So I would kind of have those kind of conversations with your child if your child isn't coming to you and telling you that there's something wrong.
Okay. So I think the rest of the questions, mashallah, it's good to see hands raised, but you can speak to her after, inshallah. We want to transition over to our dear brother Ikram. Mashallah, as I mentioned, he works with CARE, inshallah, and I'll let him go ahead and start.
Alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Is everybody awake or the food is working through your systems and making you drowsy? I'm going to stand sitting here for some time. So, my name is Ikram Haq and I'm acting executive director for the Dallas chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. And let me just tell you a little bit of what CARE is, a little bit of its history, and our core mission, and how you fit mission. So, alhamdulillah, CARE was founded in 1994 with the sole purpose of standing for justice. And as you know, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was only 20 years old and a full 20 years away from prophethood, he had joined a treaty in Mecca which is called Hilful Fudul or Hilful Mutayyibin, to stand for the rights of the oppressed people in Mecca. And this was something unheard of in that barbaric Arab society where some of the Arabs of Jahiliyyah, the pre-Islamic days, they would bury their infant daughters alive because they feared that when they grew up, they would bring shame by committing indecent acts. So CARE was founded, and alhamdulillah, CARE has grown progressively over the years. So today, alhamdulillah, we have 33 or 35 chapters across the nation. 4 of them are here in our greatest state of Texas, and one of them in Houston, and our brothers from Houston are sitting there, and probably you know Brother Mustafa Carroll, who has been the executive director there, and he also ran the chapter here in Dallas. And we are living in a time of unprecedented rise in Islamophobia. Every day, from across our chapters throughout the United States, we collect data about attacks on Islamic institutions, Muslims, people being bullied in schools, job discrimination, FBI harassment, and all of those things. And every day we are working. Give you an example, when the New Zealand massacre happened, 4:30 I received a call from Fox News, 4:30 a.m. They wanted to interview us. And then we had a press conference. And then we got, all the chapters became involved in issuing press conferences and working with our coalition partners to shine the light on this right-wing violence that is rising in the country. So, what is there for you, for example? So we deal with many cases related to Islamophobia. Every day Muslims are harassed. Recently, a Muslim family came from Oklahoma on the New Year's Eve to visit the Reunion Tower in Dallas. And it was a vacation for them, but they were viciously attacked. The hijab of the sister was pulled. She had a concussion. They hadn't done anything wrong except that they looked Muslim, very obviously, very visibly. And every day these kind of things are happening. We have an in-house attorney in our office, and across our chapters we have 50 attorneys. And all our services are absolutely free. So you don't have to pay a dime if we help you, legally or otherwise. And I will mention a few cases that happened. There was a Muslim sister who used to take a bottle of water in the restroom for istinja, for ritual purification. One day she found a security guard standing outside the restroom, and the guard said, this bottle of water is security threat. Can you believe that? You're not flying, you're on the ground, and you're just going to the bathroom. So she called us, and we contacted them, and alhamdulillah, this matter was resolved. There was a sister who was offered a job in a local business, and I'm not going to mention the name or anything to identify that business because we had an out-of-court settlement with them, and part of the settlement was that we will not divulge their identity. So, but I'm just giving you a high-level case. So she was offered the job, and as she was walking out in order to come tomorrow to work, she was told that, hey, look, you have to take this thing off in order for you to work. So she said, why? And then she called CARE and we got involved. Alhamdulillah, that led to a settlement. There are FBI agents who bring or who send agent provocateurs in the masajid. There are 60,000 informants in our masajid. And you have to be very careful because they instigate people to do something. Oh brother, I became a Muslim, just now, and I don't like the American government. I want to do this and that. So don't fall for that. Because obviously Islam teaches us to be loyal to the country where we live, the country that has given us a passport, a visa, a green card. The Muslims, to remember that the first refuge of the persecuted Muslims of Mecca was what land? What land was it? It was a Christian land ruled by Najashi Negus, a Christian king, and the Prophet ﷺ said, go to this land, this king will not persecute you because of your beliefs. And Muslims lived for 14 years. The last group of people, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, Habiba radiallahu anha, these people came after the Battle of Khaybar. And not for once they tried to subvert or overthrow the government of Najashi. So that's a lesson right there. So, inshallah ta'ala, I hope you never run into these kind of discriminations and Islamophobic attacks against you, but our sisters are most visible signs of our Islam, and therefore they are the most, the softest target for these Islamophobes. But if you ever, God forbid, come across these manifestations of hate, then please give us a call. I have some of my cards on the table, and if you have any questions, inshallah, I will try to answer as best as I can. As an FYI, CARE has published a number of booklets, guides, we call it guides, like for example, an employer's guide to Islamic practices. So when you have to grow a beard, put on hijab, go for Jum'ah, stop working at the time of Maghrib, and so on and so forth. All of those things are very well written and explained to them. And most of the times, that handbook resolves the issue. But we are here, inshallah ta'ala, and our services are absolutely free, so reach out to us. Jazakumullah khairan. Okay, so thank you. He's sitting in the corner, Comunicado. So I have the honor to be the host of another CARE executive director from Michigan, Imam Dawood Wali, and he, mashallah, he had a very busy day. Yesterday he gave a khutbah, Friday khutbah at Irving Masjid, and then he had a program about a book that he has written towards a sacred activism. And some of those books are available with me, inshallah. After the program, they will be available in the lobby. So I would like for him to come and share some of his thoughts. Inshallah, he's returning to Michigan tomorrow. And he has been one of the longest serving executive directors with the Council on American Islamic Relations, Imam Dawood Wali. Please give him a hand of applause.
السلام عليكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. I don't really have too much to add on to what Brother Karam said. May Allah preserve him. What I would say is that for the Muslim community, reverts, converts, whatever term you prefer or not, that one thing that we cannot do is suffer in silence as a community. And there's so many times where there are people who have incidences while find out after the fact that their child was bullied in school, or maybe they heard some negative comment at work and they just say it happenstance, and I hear about it like at Sunday Shah after I give the khutbah, and they don't report it to us officially, and they rationalize and they don't make any noise about it that's going to go away on its own, right? And this is a mistake. There's a saying from the civil rights movement in the United States of America back in the 60s, actually, which my father was a part of. Actually, my father first heard about Islam in Detroit, actually hearing Malcolm X preach, and he went to high school across the street from at that time called Temple No. 1, which later became Masjid Wali Muhammad in 1975. Let's give you a little background about where I come from, right? They had a saying back then that said there is no safety in the margins. There's no safety in the margins. In other words, if you think that you're just going to be quiet and put your head down, that everything's going to be safe. No, actually, the reverse happens. It actually emboldens and makes things worse. So the only way that you will stop a bully from bullying you is to raise your voice and stand up to the bully, right? Like Dawood alayhi salam, my namesake in Jalut, right? You didn't sit back and take it. So we need to raise our voices. The other thing is that Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bigotry should also be reported to CARE, not just on individual acts, but there's also what we could call institutionalized Islamophobia. So what I mean by that is that we've dealt with cases in CARE relating to anti-Muslim or Orientalist type of content in textbooks, right? Where you have negative information or false information about Muslims and Islam in actual textbooks that are being used as resources in public school systems that are teaching misinformation about Muslims and Islam. And there's a long history about that in American society. Like, American society just didn't become anti-Muslim or Orientalist, Islamophobic when 9/11 came. It goes back to when the first enslaved Africans who were Muslims couldn't freely practice Islam on plantations. It's nothing new, right? So we also deal with this. Alhamdulillah, in Michigan, we've actually gotten some school districts by talking to school boards to actually get certain textbooks removed. But when you also complain, when you come to CARE, we will also, it's just something that if you remove something in a person's life in any circumstance, there has to be something to fill the void, right? So we ask for the textbook to be pulled, and then we have a suggested text. And also, when we've complained, we've even been able to go into schools and actually give presentations about Muslims and Islam, Islamic beliefs inside the school. So it's not just about individual acts of bullying, which includes administrative and teacher bullying, by the way, because we've dealt with cases where the bullying just doesn't come from the teachers, from the students. It can also come from hostile behavior by educators, right? But this is something that we need to deal with. So again, there's no safety in the margins. Don't put your heads down. Please contact our brother here if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or our Houston office, or Austin or San Antonio in Texas. And don't stay quiet, please.
Just one question.
Okay, so the city of Detroit, I'm sorry, you mentioned about Detroit. So I'm not saying this out like mubalagha, right, or exaggeration, but really the birthplace of Islam as a social expression really is in Detroit, Michigan, right? In 1921, the Highland Park Masjid was established. It's actually something that needs to be updated. Cedar Rapids Masjid is not the first masjid in America. It's actually the Highland Park Masjid, which is in the city of Detroit, or borders Detroit, that was started by Lebanese immigrants, and then in 1924, African Americans began to join that as Sunni Muslims. This predates Nation of Islam. Nation of Islam didn't start in Detroit until 1930, right? So now in metropolitan Detroit area, we've had Muslims, even Muslim families that go back in Metro Detroit until the late 1800s. I have a mentor who is actually, alhamdulillah, it's actually amazing, where she is a third generation Muslim herself, and she has grandchildren, and she was born and raised here, as well as her parents, obviously, and who migrated at the time from Greater Syria. There was no country called Lebanon, but her family comes from what is Lebanon today. She speaks Arabic, right? And she never lived in Lebanon or in Sham, right? So we have now about 70 masajid in the metropolitan Detroit area, about 300,000 Muslims in the metropolitan Detroit area, about 25% African American, about 25% South Asian, about 20% Arabs, Arab Americans, and then we have Bosnians, Albanians, some Turks. We have a little bit of everything. Alhamdulillah, we have the expression of the Ummah of our Prophet alayhi salam. You can see a little bit of everything in Detroit, except for we don't have really any like Malaysians or Indonesians or people from Southeast Asia in our community in any real numbers.
Jazakallah khair. And if any of y'all want to know, mashallah, you can report to CARE, or you can, mashallah, as you see, this is a primary example for individuals that you may not need it now, but when you need it, you're going to want to call on somebody that will defend you. The proper steps that can be taken, whether it's your child that's receiving the wrong text, they come and ask you questions that are purely Islamophobic, or you yourself face that, please, as I mentioned, after the session, reach out to them. What are the proper steps that should be taken? Are there any resources that I can come and present? How do I want a presentation at a church, I want a presentation at a school? These are the individuals that you talk to.
That's submitting of that form online triggers an email to our attorney, and then we follow up from there.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to say that to your point, when you do need care, you will definitely know it, right? I had a situation happen in Mobile, Alabama, where I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get my license changed over from Texas to Alabama, and they told me I had to take my scarf off, and I was like, not gonna happen. And so before I even left the DMV, they were actually in the process of getting someone from the back. Before they could even do that, I was on care. So, I mean, you should definitely make yourself familiar with the organization, because you never know what you're going to do.
And thank you for that. May Allah reward you and protect you. Also, just let you know, I'm not saying this out of exaggeration, that CARE is recognized nationwide as like a legitimate, nationally recognized civil rights organization. And I know of cases where people have come to me this year and say, I was having this type of problem. And I said, I told the people, oh, if you don't accommodate me, I'm gonna call CARE. And they literally gave the accommodation on the spot because they know that they could be facing a potential lawsuit, right? So it's a known thing where when Muslims mention CARE's name, many people in the broader society, in the status quo, they actually do know about CARE.
Jazakallah khair, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you with Dr. Khan and Sister Silva for your effort in providing resources, realistic solutions for real problems, inshallah. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you all and for every consultation that you give or for every number you dial or call that you answer, that it's in your scale of good deeds, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.